Hi, I'm Dr. Nicole Lipkin, and this is the Hey Kiddo podcast, where we talk about all things parenting. Today, we're talking with Dr. Robin Hornstein. Robin has been a psychologist for over 40 years and honestly is one of the best around. She specializes in parenting, fertility concerns, eating and anxiety disorders, and LGBTQIA plus concerns. We're going to be talking about all things related to us parents: guilt, confusion, working, not working, saying sorry after we mess up, all the things that make us feel good one minute and horrible the next. Robin, it's so awesome to have you on the show again.
Oh, it's lovely to be here again. Happy to see you.
Yeah, so great to see you. Okay, I want to dive right in and I want to start with talking about parent burnout, the big one. Let's talk about the signs. Let's talk about what to do. Let's talk about all the things. What is parenting burnout?
Parenting burnout is just sort of life as a parent, first of all, because parenting is the one job that lasts about 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
There's really little downtime, even when you carve out time for yourself. Maybe you're working, maybe you're going out, maybe you're meditating or exercising or all the things that you're supposed to be doing for self-care. It's interesting because our children are like bosses with unrelenting schedules and demands. And yet we love them and they bring us the most amount of joy, which is why it becomes so crazy. And I think where we really see burnout is when people sort of, instead of practicing parenting and relationship building and understanding this is ongoing and ever changing, they really think of it as, I need to be the best parent.
Mm.
I need to do what I see on Instagram, what I see on TikTok. I need to do what my cousin's doing. And they forget that, like, this is your kid, your relationship, your, if you're parenting alone or you're parenting with someone else, your negotiations in that way. The signs are you're resenting your life, you're resenting yourself. You want to like leave, you want to scream, you may feel anger towards your children that you never felt when they were like a year early, younger or something. And
Yep.
you don't take care of yourself, and that's one of the things. Burnout, the worst part of burnout is people are like, just start, why don't you do some self-care? Why don't you go exercise? And you're like, all I want to do is be under like a weighted blanket,
Yes.
trash television or a beach
Yes.
read, and no one say my name, mom or
Yes.
dad, for like hours or ever.
Yes. Yes.
And it doesn't, it gets to the place of resentment. And when you get there, you got to do some things to take care of yourself. I absolutely love Caitlin Murray, I think her last name is, who does Big Time Adulting. She
Mm.
has an Instagram account. She has a podcast. I will say she's one of the few people who is constantly, if I got her name wrong, I'm really sorry, um, who is constantly just saying, I'm standing in the kitchen angrily dancing because I just spent 3 hours hostage because I want my child to eat their dinner and they weren't eating their dinner. And she like expresses it. But
Yeah.
I think when you get burnt out, if you don't do, like, she'll literally dance like a maniac, like she'll
Yeah.
jump around her. And I think we really need to find the outlet that works for us to escape the burnout. And it
Yeah.
doesn't look the same for everybody.
Right. It doesn't. I like to think about parenting burnout as being like the expectation that we have of ourselves, ourselves as parents versus how we show up, because none of us show up the way we want to show up ever. Like
Absolutely.
it's impossible. I think it was Brene Brown. I'm probably gonna botch this. I can't remember who it was, but my husband and I were watching some video where they were talking about like, and I forgot what it was. I forgot. Ugh, I'm just forgetting everything. Burnout.
Uh-oh.
Hello. Um, they were talking about like how like you're like when you're depleted, right? And that whoever it was and their husband had this like message that they would send to each other, like, I'm at a zero, which meant that like he had to show up, or he would say I'm at a zero, which meant, or I'm at a one, that meant that she had to show up. And so my husband, one night after Charlie had just a meltdown for no reason for hours, and it was just horrible and terrible, I'm like, I'm at a -5. And he's like, I'm at a -6. And we just kept on going and going and going and going and going. And we just actually successfully ignored our child. And he eventually calmed down.
I love that. I love that
Yeah.
because, the other thing, and not to bring the brain into it too much, but I'm fascinated by how our brains work and how kids'
Hmm.
brains works, right? And so kids are like in this, what we call the amygdala space, right? They're like, they're feelers. They're feeling their way through without the context of history and story and a way to contextualize what's actually happening. And adults, I'll pretend most of us are supposed to be operating from a more prefrontal, our prefrontal cortex, which doesn't develop till later in life, which means we're mitigating and understanding our emotions and managing them. But there's
Yeah.
nobody in the world that can bring you closer to being your 2-year-old self than a 2-year-old or a 16-year-old who is in your face. And so we have to understand they burn us out partly, and maybe we burn them out. I don't know. Maybe it goes both ways in some,
Probably. Yeah.
because we are coming from these places of like, it's not that big of deal. I heard somebody I was in Trader Joe's and I watched this mother. I watched the interaction for like, I don't know, I was following behind her. And first she was on her phone talking to somebody and missed these opportunities where her actual, like her 3-year-old was like, what's that? What's that? What's that? And I thought, oh my God, I didn't have a cell phone when my daughter was that age. And if we were walking around the market, I was like, that's actually a cucumber. That's a small
Right.
tomato. That's the ones you like. And
Right.
but then it got to the place where her child was about to like start this meltdown, and I saw the mom start to melt down.
Mm.
And like instead of thinking, I just kind of ignored her while she was talking. I get off the phone. I expect her to now whoosh through the market and let's get everything and get out of here. She didn't at any point give herself or her child a break. And all they needed was a break. She needed to get down on her level and say, what would you like to pick for yourself? What should we bring home for daddy or grandmom or whoever was home? Like
Mm.
just shifting that. But of course, once a kid is in a space,
Yeah.
sometimes we get there. And I think that's part of also what kind of burns us out. We forget that we can think this through, we can come up with an answer. Although sometimes we're down at what if were you in -6, a -5? I mean, that's pretty
-1,000.
right. Right. And sometimes
Yeah.
ignoring is a good idea, right? Sometimes you do have to ignore as long as they're safe.
Yeah, as long as they're safe. Right. And sometimes you just both have to be the negative. But you said two things that's super interesting to me. When you were raising your daughter, you did not have a cell phone. That was not a thing.
Not a happy phone, like with like a whole computer in it.
Right.
Right. I had like I
Right.
could answer a phone, but it was different. Yeah.
Right. Right. So your daughter actually got the benefit of you being there and
Yeah.
not as, I mean, distracted maybe, but not as distracted as we all are.
I think that's really true. And I also think that I work with a lot of parents, and I am really big on what are your screen-free days, like
Hmm.
yours as well as your children's. Like,
Hmm.
and it's hard work. If you're burnout, the last thing you want to hear me say is engage with your family completely for a day. But what happens is you start to play a game. You go outside and throw a ball. You do these simple, simple family things. You bake Rice Krispie treats. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You're not a million places.
Right.
And your kid isn't a million places. And you're giving them different kinds of life skills. Like we don't live on these little screens or the bigger screens that like yank us in and we're disengaged. On the other hand, older kids, some of their disengagement after COVID, I think, is kind of learning how to be individuated in the family. Unfortunately, sometimes it's just on screens, but like I think we're getting out of the pandemic mentality enough that they're back with friends and pulling away. And I guess that's the other thing I want to say. When they're really little, we crave these breaks. And when they start to be individual, we want them to talk to us more and we want them to engage with us more. And they're like moving away. So we're always running that narrative you were talking about, like,
Right.
and it starts with the birth plan, right? It's a birth plan which turns into the actual birth story, and then
Right.
it's the parenting plan, which turns into what kind of parent really you are, right? Like,
Right.
and it's being curious and interested in yourself and figuring out how to protect yourself and your child from the ultimate level of exhaustion that just gets you giving up, right? They
Right.
don't feel abandoned. You don't want to abandon them either, or yourself.
Right. Right. So with that, and again, I want you to talk about the brain because I think it's important. It's important to know that, like, what is it, 25
Yeah,
that our
25,
prefrontal,
26 is when we are like our
yeah, fully
brains are
formed.
fully cooked. From 15 to 25, especially, new neural pathways are like honing and sharpening and doing all this stuff. And they can't possibly think through things the way we can, even the most mature kid. They're
Sure.
still lacking some skills.
Sure, sure. And yeah, so I think that's super important because again, it's like we're all just trying to do the best we can do. And
Yeah,
sometimes we don't have the capability to do. So
right.
going back to parent burnout, where you start to be angry or you start to resent your family or whatever it might be. What are the things that you can do? You're talking about a screen-free day. What are some other things that you can do?
Rely on other adults. Like, rely on the adults that are in your life. If you don't have them, join a parent group to, get out there and take your kid to things like, parents and me class, dancing class, whatever it is, and start to have a group of people you can connect with, commiserate with, and even support. I know for me, I had a friend who we were there when we needed each other to, like, and I had one and she had two, and we were like, that's fine. Like, I'll take your two, you take my one, back and forth, to just give yourself a little bit of a
Mhm.
break. You deserve and need a break, and it's okay for them to see you needing it. It's not
Right.
they made you. I mean, you don't give them a sense of, like, that sarcastic, I wouldn't be this way if you weren't doing what you're doing kind of thing. But it's you relying on other adults is, I think, really, really key. you know
And it's interesting, like that you say that because I think your kids being able to see that you have a life outside of them
yeah.
and that you do rely on people. That's one of, I think, the most important life skills to learn that a lot of us are terrible at is relying on other people or
Oh,
asking for help.
asking for help.
Oh,
Well, it comes from that really deep, deep belief that we're failing at something, which is really tapping shame. And shame is
right.
one of the pieces that I really think about a lot for parents, because I think there's a lot of shame and guilt around whether their kids are meeting certain markers. Are they the same as other
Right.
children? Does your house look as clean and neat as your neighbor's house? Like, are you doing what your parents did that you swore to yourself you'd never do? I mean, I think that's part of this whole thing is, if you're feeling ashamed of how you're treating yourself or your children or your spouse, you're less likely to want to say to somebody, I'm drowning here.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think you need to be able to say those words out loud and with trusted people who aren't going to say, well, yeah, you deserve that. You did that. They're mostly like going to be like, oh, yeah, I've had days like that. We all
Right.
have days like that.
So do you think there's a connection between parent guilt and shame and burnout?
Yeah, because I actually think that guilt and anger are coming from a place of fear and shame.
Mm.
If we can address, how do I take care of myself when I feel afraid? What is it I really need to be ashamed of? I'm doing everything I can possibly do to have a healthy child, a healthy family, my work life go well, my relationships go well. And listen, on top of that, let's not forget that a lot of parents that are raising young children or, middle school children are also taking care of elderly parents that are getting sick.
Right.
And there's also that, like, how many people can you parent at the same time when you end up not able to take care of yourself and feel like a failure in each place, because you're never going to be able to, you can't accommodate and take care of everybody at 100%.
Right.
I think when we take the shame down, it's because we stop aiming for 100% at everything. Like, it's okay to get a B. It's actually okay to get a C. But I
Hmm.
don't think people know that, as even as parents, they don't realize that. And that one day of crappy parenting, really, your kid has lifetime with you until they leave the home. What you want to aim for is good enough life together, not
Right.
I never disappointed them. I never once yelled. I never, did anything wrong. I like followed all the rules. I never said no. I mean, like whatever it is that your goal is, like forget it. Those are
Right. Well, I want to dive in a little bit more too, because yeah, that would make sense that it's connected to burnout and the pressure that we put on ourselves. I want to dive in a little bit more to guilt and shame. When I will never forget this in grad school. In our last year, I think it was, we had to take a supervision class. I love our guests joining us. What's your guest
yes,
name?
this is Nandor the Relentless.
Nander?
Nandor the Relentless.
Nandor the
It comes from
Relentless.
a television show. Yeah.
Okay. And relentless, just coming in and like wants to be on camera. Love
Oh,
it.
he's relentless. Yes.
Love it. So we took this supervision class, and it just so happened that day, and it was our professor was a woman, and
Mhm.
it happened that day that none of the guys showed up, which was weird because we had a 50-50 class. So it was just us women talking, and so we decided to have a conversation about work and
Mm.
like, do you F your kiddos up if you work, or do you not if you don't?
Oh,
Like that was the conversation. And she said something that was so great. And she said, you're going to screw your kids up if you work. You're going to screw your kids up if you don't work.
oh
The
yeah.
reality is we're just trying to do the best.
Uh-huh.
And it's what is important to you and your family. And I
Oh,
loved that.
100%, because I think that's the thing. If you think you're not, like my daughter once said the words that, of course, every parent loves to hear, this isn't fair at all. This isn't fair.
Mhm.
Kids' sense of fairness relies on completely their sense of I just got turned down to something that I think is completely appropriate, whether
Yeah.
it is or isn't. And I said, would you like me to write it down so you know how mommy has been in therapy on and off, and I love therapy and I'm a therapist. I said, would you like me to write it down for you so you can remember it and you can tell your therapist how unfair I was because I wouldn't let you do this. Now, I did use a little sarcasm there, which is not something I always rely on.
Love that.
But at the same time, she laughed and she's
Yeah.
like, is that a thing? And I'm like, oh yeah, I could keep a list because I'm going to disappoint you a lot. It's hard to keep somebody safe and help them learn how to be a grown up, which is my job. And that's the other thing. I think we go the other way. We get so enraptured with like, well, let me do it differently and better. And you start with this whole thing where you're like, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. And we're all like so guilty that we end up then doing the thing that everyone should not be doing, is lecturing our kids about a very important topic. They just stole something. They're 7 years old and they walked out of the pharmacy with, I don't
Bubble
know,
gum.
bubble gum. Do you go into like a whole thing that gets bigger and bigger, bigger, or do you say, where did this come from? You start out curious, you ask the question, they may say, I wanted it. And I said, well, you say, well, you didn't really ask that, but we have to, when we're in a store, we have to buy the thing. Otherwise, there's a name for it. Do you know what the name for it is when we take something that's not ours? And usually, kids will say steal. They may understand shoplift. And then you can just say what made you feel that you wanted it so badly that it was okay. And what do you think happens to the store if you take something? And then you leave it. You don't start on you're going to go down a life of crime and then all these terrible things are going to happen and you have to like on and on and on and on and on. But we end up embarrassed or guilty. Kids steal. They just
They
they,
steal.
they do. I mean, and adults steal. How many paper clips do most adults have that they've never purchased because they've taken
Oh
them home?
yeah. Oh yeah, the Staples chompy, all the Staples stuff.
All the staple stuff, honestly, most adults
Yep.
can open a store with all
Yep.
the stuff they've taken from work.
Yep.
And I think that's really where we get into these phases of like guilt and like how to fix it and how to make our kids a better person, and how to make us better parents. And yeah, it is really tricky. It's really
So
tricky
I
to,
have a question. Do you after your kid steals the bubble gum,
yeah,
do you and you have the like, let's understand it conversation? Do
yeah.
you bring them if you're in the car, do you bring them back to pay for it?
Why not? I mean, it's just realistic. Like,
Yeah.
walk out, let's walk back in and say, we forgot to pay for this. You don't have to
Hmm.
make, you don't have to like
You have to shame them.
embarrass them, right? But my child forgot to pay for this. We were walking around really fast. How much is this? And you may
Hmm.
even tell them if they're old enough to have an allowance, if you're giving them that, an allowance, that it's coming out of their allowance because it's something they
Hmm.
pay for because they want it on their own, right?
Yep.
And how proud they'll be for paying for it. Like, and
Yep.
that's the other thing. And I think you probably know this better than me because you work with executives all the time. But that whole sense that people do better, that Harvard study that came out, I don't know when, that people do better when you tell them what they're doing well. So
Hmm.
you don't have to flip this into shame, right? You can flip this into, don't you feel proud of yourself now? You went
Yep.
back, paid for it, it's yours, and you can enjoy it.
Right. And you're helping shape good behavior
Right.
and choice making in the future. So back to the guilt. Back to
You
the
like the
guilt.
guilt. Okay, let's go into the guilt.
The guilt, the guilt, the guilt, the guilt, the guilt, the guilt, the guilt with everything. The guilt with everything. And, I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about the guilt that moms feel.
Oh, yeah.
Not that dads don't.
No, but moms, yes, dads feel it. And we could even tie it down to even in same-sex couples, there's going to be
Hmm.
one person who has more of the role, and let's degender it a little bit, but more of the role of the person who actually is also maintaining all of the appointments or all of the things and asking the other person, can you fit this in, and managing calendars and all that. And oftentimes it's one parent, and oftentimes in a heterosexual couple, it's going to be the mom. Some dads do a great job at this. So please do
Hmm.
not, I don't want to offend
Hmm.
any others
Yep.
kicking ass out there. I hope I can curse and say that on
We
here.
just did. It is what it is.
Okay, good. So I think, what do we do with this guilt that mothers feel
The
for
crushing guilt.
everything, the
Hmm.
crushing guilt? I shouldn't work. I should work. I don't like being home. I want to be home. What
Hmm.
is my child getting out of being in daycare? What is my child getting if they're with a nanny?
Hmm.
What if they have me, but I'm really unhappy because I want to be at work?
Yep.
I have yet to meet a mother who does not struggle with that complex around,
Hmm.
I will never do it right. And
Hmm.
guilty because I am going to come to a place where I realize that I have failed everything. Maybe I failed
Yeah.
my partner, or I failed my child, or I failed my work.
Yeah.
And that's where that guilt sets in, of like the guilt, the failure, instead of just like, how many ways can you spread yourself thin?
Right.
How many full, so maybe the bigger question is, and to ask yourself the question, how many full-time jobs can a mom have?
It's a good question. Because you said before, like it's partially about shifting your perception of A plus to
Yeah.
good enough, to B
Yeah.
plus being okay or C plus being okay. But how do you actually psychologically do that? Especially if you're like an overachiever and you had this image, and again tied into the burnout, which is like how we see ourselves versus how we show up. Like, how do you actually shift your mental state, doctor?
Well, doctor, I think part of it is you have to, I go simple. You need questions to ask yourself or mantras to hold on to, right? And I think with questions, it is how many full-time jobs could I do well? How much percent of me can go to each of these jobs? To me, part of it is learning to be present where you are, which is impossible for most moms.
Mhm.
With your kids, are you with your kids, or you're also getting their lunch ready for tomorrow and making dinner and running the dishwasher, and you taking care of them and then answering a phone call from work, or seeing, when you're at work, are you at work, or are you thinking, I sent a kid to school today who has like a mini fever, I gave them some Tylenol, I'm gonna get in trouble. It's really bad. What am I spreading? But I didn't have anybody who would come and take care of this kid. If everybody gets sick, it's going to be my fault. Like, we have to be present where we are,
Mhm.
and we have to find ways to, like, I think maybe what we're talking about is respond to yourself as, it's okay to get a B today at work.
Mhm.
Okay to be a B parent today?
Hmm.
Is it global? Am I a B all day long? Am I a B with my kid all day long? Or am I an A
Right.
in some moments where it's the end of the night, I haven't paid as much attention as I want, and the child's in the bathtub and they look up and they say, I love you, mommy. Or that was that macaroni and cheese was so good. And pretty much that it came out of a box, but
Yeah. But thank
guess
you.
what? It was so good. And I think we have to take those moments in, or those moments where you just want to hug them and read them a story. And, I think bedtime is like a great time for moms to like recap
Mm.
for themselves. You're
Hmm.
snuggled, you're reading or you're singing a song,
Hmm.
and you're just in that space of, I'm just present with my child.
Yep. I'm going to say something, and this is hard to admit, but as I'm listening, I'm relating to this because first of all, I don't know if I'm projecting here. I might be. I think it's easier to do the dishwasher, to do the dishes, to clean up the house than to sit and be fully present. Because you're getting that dopamine hit. You're checking all the things that you have to do off your list that you
Right.
have to be accomplished.
Right.
It's so much easier than just sitting and being there. Second of all, I find bedtime to be the most special time too, because that's all there is. That's all there is. Like it is like this. There's no phones in the room. There's no interruptions. It is your child and you and whoever else is with you, if there's someone else with you, and the book and the hugging and the cuddling and the snuggling. And
Right.
it's
Well,
a
yeah.
really special time.
And why can't that be enough? Why
Hmm.
can't a mom say, I checked the boxes I had to, I did the things. Maybe my child was looking at some TV, excuse me,
Hmm.
some TV show when I was making dinner or something. But I have this time, and
Yeah.
this is remembered time, because who doesn't remember their mom or their dad reading to them?
Yeah.
Like, we remember that.
You remember that. I think dinner time is another time that can be really like, it doesn't have to be the several hours. And I think, I
Mm.
mean, you're making like, I love this conversation because I think the guilt is again wrapped up into the expectation of how
Yeah.
we think we should show up versus how in reality we do. And again, maybe I'm making excuses here, but it's also good for our kids to see us doing life.
Well, yeah, because how are they going to know if it's all magic, right?
Right.
If you have everybody doing things for you,
Hmm.
and you're with your kid, and does your kid learn to like make dinner? Does your child understand that
Right.
there are chores that really nobody likes, and some
Right.
chores we do like?
Right.
I love, I love, and always have having a clean sink before I go to bed. I have
I do
noticed
too.
that my adult married daughter, her sink is pretty clean every night.
Bingo.
And it
Hmm.
could be her, it could be her husband or two of them, and maybe not every night. I don't know. I'm not there every night to see it.
Hmm.
But I do see this. Sometimes some of those chores really do feel good. And plus, I don't think it's healthy to give a child 100% of your attention all the
All
time,
the
because
time.
they're going to learn to play alone,
Right.
to be with other people, to like be creative. I think one of the things I get sad about is as kids get older, sometimes we see them being less creative.
Yeah.
Give them creative time and let them see you being creative. Maybe your creative thing is you like to bake every once in a while, or you like to watercolor, or you do something. Let them see that it's not
Hmm.
always them, although it could be an activity you enjoy together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Why do you think kids stop being as creative?
First of all, I think they are being creative in other ways that we don't always see. Maybe we shouldn't say like all gaming is bad, right? We get worried about that. But sometimes they're being really creative in their world building and all that kind of stuff. But the overt art and like free thinking, freewheeling, it stops, I think, as kids start to go to school and people they get more uniform. And for some schools that are public schools in particular, the arts and creativity get less attention,
Hmm.
less funding for kids to have the continued kind of creativity. And I
Right.
think I'm going to also go out on a limb. I think a lot of adults pull back because their kids want to do arts that they're not good at, or in my case, they go past third grade math and I'm not good at it. And I want to pull back. that's another place to show that we can play without perfection.
Right.
If your child says, I want to learn how to do this thing, do it with me, mom, or who cares if you're not good at it?
Yeah.
That's where the shame comes in. Like, what will my child think? Oh, maybe they'll think they're better at drawing than I am. Like, I
Yeah.
don't care. I'm not great at drawing.
Right. It was funny. We bought this new board game and the directions were terrible.
Oh,
They
all
were
new board games are terrifying.
it,
Yes.
it was terror and the directions, there were mistakes in it. It was just terrible. And Matt, throwing my husband into the bus here, he got super frustrated and was
Yeah.
like, I don't want to play this. And
Uh-huh.
like he just was really feeling really impatient. And Charlie goes to him, Daddy, you need to have a growth mindset. It's about the power of yet. He literally said that. I was like, oh, what?
Go Charlie, first of all. And second of all, it's okay for them to see us frustrated. Last time I
Yeah,
tried a new board game, and it was a bunch of us, and we all said, let's just make up the rules.
yeah,
Because I
they're
don't get
hard.
this. I can't follow 7 rules and they refer back to each other. I'm like,
No,
what's happening here? I'm like,
no.
let's make up rules. And we goofed around and played.
I love that. I feel like my mental state is just stuck in like Monopoly and Shoots and Ladders. Like I can't go beyond. Like I just power of yet.
Power of
Okay.
yet. Yeah.
Power of yet. Here we go. Here we go. So, I think one of the things like when talking about parent burnout, when talking about parent guilt, the other part that I think we didn't really delve into is our natural tendency to socially compare and to look at other families and kids.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, yeah, comparison, I don't know, it probably goes back to forever ago. It got worse with the internet. It certainly did. Because and I'm big on unfollow. My favorite word is unfollow.
Mm,
Stop following people on TikTok or X or Instagram or Facebook that make you feel bad. Why would you do that?
you're right.
I'd rather follow somebody who's like a beautifully messed up mess
Right.
at something than somebody who is all about like, look what I've done. Like, look at these amazing children. We're all in the same outfit and we're all clean and we're all having beautiful pictures taken. When I know darn well that I just saw somebody who said we tried to have a session with our new baby and our 3-year-old, and most of it's our 3-year-old screaming at the top of their lungs. And
Yeah.
I'm like, but that's the real picture of your family right this minute.
Right.
Look at
Why do people do that? Like what's your like again, what's your psychological perspective on why people need to put this fake image out there?
well, I think it comes from back to the shame, right?
Mm,
Like I think it's if I look good, then my journey will inspire others instead of how about if I look real and I can actually connect with others, other people who are feeling guilty at messing things up as a parent or as a
mm,
mom, somebody who, said something they wish they hadn't to their child. I mean, all of us do that at one point or
yeah.
another. Come on.
Yeah.
And I think I'd rather hear that person say, oh my God, today, I used the words because I said so, which I promised I'd never do because my parents said it. And I was like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then and then follow that up with, and then I said, "Oh, I didn't like that when I was a kid. How did that sound to you?" And your kids say, "I don't want to follow it because you said so. I think it's stupid." All
Right.
right, well, let's figure this out together. But I think we curate our lives, our houses, and our wedding and our relationships and all of it instead of the reality of these things are hard. It's all hard. It's hard to single parent. It's hard to not be a parent. It's hard to be a parent of one child, hard to be a parent of more than one child. It's hard to have a relationship.
Yep.
It's hard to be a child of someone. All of those things are hard, but they also can bring joy and connection if we stop feeling so guilty or ashamed.
It's interesting because on that note, it's, an interesting dynamic that I've noticed with parents. And again, I've noticed it in women because
Yeah.
I might go out with women or whatever. If like women start like other moms start like talking bad about their spouses or partners or about their children or whatever, but you might not feel that way. There is a like the feeling of needing to fabricate something or just getting to the point where you're like, no, I'm not. Things are okay. Like, what happens if you are in the okay place?
Well, you know what? You say, as of right now, we're okay. I could be you in about 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
We've had our ups and downs. What? Tell me a couple that hasn't had ups and downs.
Everyone.
So I think the point is to be able to say, I'm feeling real lucky right now. We're in a good place, but I can relate to everything you're saying because I've
Yeah.
been, and I probably know I'll be there again.
It's
Instead
this
of, oh, yeah,
realness.
us too, let me find the thing that my spouse just did that was really terrible, even though
Right.
maybe you're in a really loving place.
Yeah. See,
For
I
now.
love that. It's just about being real. It's about being vulnerable. It's about being real. Because I think it's just getting harder and harder with comparison, like you're saying, like with technology, with social media. It's just in your face constantly. Complete side note, and this is very off topic,
Okay, cool.
but I'd like to ask you it.
Yeah.
What are your views on screen time? You mentioned video gaming can be sometimes okay. What are your views on that? On screen time in general for kids?
I think it should be age appropriate. I think as a kid gets older and you know that they're safe online, they probably are talking to their friends, doing the things that kids do. It's not the worst thing in the world. I think if it's all they do, that's not good, and we have to look at it. I think little kids, if we teach them that there are time limits, will understand as they get older that there may be other limits. If we don't, then they're going to be really confused when you say, well, now we have to talk about like people looking for you online that aren't really your friends.
Right.
You have to teach them. If you teach them, I think, and I also do think showing that there's a day in our family a week, maybe, where for a day or a whole half day, whatever it is, we give up the screen and we get outside and we play some games. Maybe we even make hot chocolate and we all just read our books if they're old
Hmm.
enough to hold their own book and like look at their pictures
Hmm.
themselves as they're reading things themselves, like, Junie B. Jones and all the good stuff that comes
Yep.
along. I do think it should not be an unlimited commodity. I don't think it should be for adults either, though. I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon, but I buy books that I can hold in my hand as well as Kindle books. I
Hmm.
like believe that except Barbara Streisand's book, which weighed too much. I'm just going to say that weighed too much. I had to get it. As a matter of fact, then it was a heavy read. And so then I went to Spotify and I'm listening to it on double time. Just like some things you have to you just make allowances
That's
for.
amazing. That's amazing.
But why? But you wouldn't do anything all the time. Do you eat every minute of the day? No. Do you read every minute of the day? Do you
No.
work every minute of the day? Like,
Yeah.
why are we screening every minute that we have?
Huh.
Sometimes we get lost in it. And I think, come on, like it's gorgeous out today. I personally
Yep.
took a long walk. Like I needed to breathe. I went out and did some errands. I took a walk, talking to you. I have a class tonight I'm doing. I like mix it up.
Mix
And
it up.
up for your children. Help them learn to. How many toys do your kids have? If they have a lot of toys, but all they're holding is the screen in their hand, why do they have all the toys?
Right. It's a good point. And mix it up as an adult sounds like a good point to also help with parent exhaustion.
Mix
I
it
love
up.
that. You mentioned something with regard to like the fear of becoming our parents, or maybe the appreciation of becoming our parents, or
Both.
whatever it
Yeah.
might be. Talk about that and what that means for people.
All right, since the whole entire world has come from a somewhat dysfunctional family, it is impossible not to have some dysfunction in your family because I don't even know what function means. It's like normal, right?
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
parts of our families will inevitably have disappointed us or been difficult, and some parts will not be, unless it's a
Hmm.
very traumatic, really, really bad situation,
Hmm.
and they exist. Generally, our parents did some things we really appreciate and like, and some things that really didn't mesh with us. They didn't listen to us or something we didn't like. And I think, how do we, first of all, know that that's embedded in us and at some point it might show up? How do we deal with that if it does? Or learn to be a different kind of parent? And how do we also do the things that our parents did well? And or, the other thing is, that whole thing about how parents aren't the same parents that raised you when you're an adult. Like the aliens come in and those new parents that
Right.
everybody thinks are really cool and they like them, and you're like, no, 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 they did this bad thing when I was young.
Right. Right.
I think sometimes it helps watching our parents as grandparents,
Hmm.
because they had that same love for us, but they, as grandparents, don't have the stress of daily care for us.
Interesting.
And maybe appreciating that helps us see that there's grandmom on the floor playing like a silly game over and over and over again because that's what the child loves doing, and
Hmm.
they're not involved in making dinner. Maybe they're retired and they're not
Right.
working. They
Right.
get all the goodness that we wish we had as parents, but that we can't have as parents. It's not
Right.
available.
That's such a forgiving perspective. I love that.
Yeah, it
I
helps.
love that. That helps a lot. I love that. And on that note, how do you tied back into parent exhaustion and parent burnout and all of that? What's your advice or recommendations when a parent is judging your parenting?
Oh yeah.
Oh
That's
yeah.
so not
I mean,
fun.
let's move from forgiving to what do you do with that one?
And they will.
And they will. And what if it's like very clear? Like, what do you do?
I think a couple things. If they're able to have real conversations with you, which some parents are, you say, you ask questions like you do with your kids. So I kind of feel judged by you, mom, a little bit when I don't know, do this parenting thing that I learned that I think is really relevant now and you didn't do. And I guess I wonder if you felt that way from your own mom.
Hmm.
And I also wonder if you could give me the benefit of the doubt that I'm doing my best, because I guess I still want your approval. And
Hmm.
that's hard to ask for. It's a vulnerable place to be because you may get a parent that says, I'm not going to approve. I don't agree with this at all.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, so how do we learn to live with the fact that I don't want it in my face that you don't agree with me about this?
Mm.
How do we live with that? How do we come to terms with it in such a way that we can kind of parallel our lives together in a way where we can enjoy each other's company, you can enjoy the grandchildren, but you can keep the fact that you don't like something to yourself. And here's the trickier part. What if it's something you want them to do when you're not there, if they're babysitting, their grandchildren?
Mm.
For instance, what if you don't do a late night snack? They've had a dinner and a snack,
Yep.
but the late night snack is when they actually aren't hungry and they're asking you for a late night snack because they're delaying bedtime.
Delaying bedtime. Yep. Last night. Yep. Hmm.
Last night, as a matter of fact, that's
Last
right.
night. Last night
Um,
banana. Hmm.
there you go. And you say, unless this child has truly not eaten dinner or not eaten a snack, and they're really actually hungry, and you'll know that. You'll know how much they've eaten. I want you to not give them a late night snack because then it usually happens after they've brushed their teeth. And then we start with the brushing the teeth again and the this and the that and the other. And the parent's like, I'm the grandparent. I want to do what I want to do. This is the conundrum that has been forever with parents. Do you say to yourself, what if grandparents get away with a little something that parents don't? Does it really change or hurt the situation if their kid thinks the grandparent does a special thing? Or is it such an egregious thing that you need to say, if you do this and I'm really uncomfortable with it, I'd rather not have you with them at bedtime. I think there's a
You have to
negotiation.
make that decision.
You do. You do. Because I think grandparent, they have to get away with a little bit of grandparenting, but
Sure.
not if it's all judgy, and not if it, and certainly not if they say, I don't agree with your parents. Like the other thing is you set that rule that they may judge you, but they may not tell the judgment to your child, because that's really not okay.
But what if the judgment comes out in front of the child where it's not verbally said, but you know it's happening and you see it? You know what I'm saying? Like in the actions or in the interactions.
I think you pull that person, you pull your parent
You had
aside.
the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. And you say, you know what? hey, why don't we maybe go watch some screen time, take a minute, and
Yeah.
I need to talk to Nana for a second, because
You need to address it.
you do need to address it. You really can't have it that the child is thinking of you and your parent as like against each other over something that they want, that usually that you've set some kind of limit on, and they want to see
Hmm.
who wins, because then they're
Hmm.
invested in thinking it'll change. I think it's demeaning and demoralizing to be a parent and have your parent ignore you, or make it in such a way that your child feels that difference.
So you're saying confront it. And I can again imagine how these are the things that make parenting so tough
And
too.
it comes in weird ways. Like I was working with a family a while ago where what was going on really was the family was vegetarian. The grandparents were not. And the grandparents were insistent that if the child was with them, they could have burgers and all this other stuff. And the parents were like, we are raising our children vegetarian. When they choose to make a choice to not be vegetarian when they're older, we will respect them. If they say,
Mm,
I'm a meat eater now. But if they're like totally happy with their vegetarian like lifestyle in the family and enjoying it, I'm not sure this is a great place for a grandparent to set like a hard line,
got you.
because children are perfectly healthy if they're raised vegetarian. There is no evidence that says
Absolutely.
they are not healthy as long as they get all the protein and all the, calcium and all
Absolutely.
the other stuff that they need. So I think we need to respect the parents here.
Interesting. So I mean, again, I think that this opens up a can of worms often for families, but holding it in can be more damaging to how parents are interacting with their kids because of the exhaustion that it creates, because of the guilt, because of the turmoil.
You need to have good conversations. And I think you need to be able to open the conversation in such a way that is not hurtful, disrespectful, get somebody's ire up fast so that they're not able to hear you, and that's hard in the moment, because all
Yeah.
you want to say is, what the heck are you doing here? This can't happen. Like, I don't know.
Hmm.
Or you did this worse, and we all could have this feeling. You did this to me when I was a kid. You're doing it to me again. I don't like it. You have to stop it. Having a bigger conversation is really, really like important.
Warranted. Yeah.
Yeah. And bigger doesn't mean longer. Bigger may mean calmer. Remember, back to the brain, like when we're triggered, our amygdala is firing, we're all over the place. We are reactors. And when we're reactors, we are not likely to come up with a really good conversation. That's when we need to get ourselves back, get that, I guess, the adrenaline and cortisol and all the things that we don't need in our body, like calmer, get ourselves mellow again, and then have that conversation.
Do you ever recommend if people really can't are so upset about it, and I
Mhm,
can imagine many situations where people would be so upset about it,
mhm.
and the ability to not have the hijacked amygdala and
Yeah,
like just do you ever recommend writing an email or a letter to a
absolutely.
judging parent
Yes.
to
And
to kickstart?
just to kickstart it, and not a text, please. Like,
Not a
things are
text.
not well said in texts. You can't
Hmm.
think about it long enough. You're angry. But again, take a breath, and listen, I have had adult children and their parents, so grandparents, in the room for therapy to work out that kink in the relationship to make it better so that the family can feel more functional, especially if, and this happens a lot, you've built a in-law suite because your parents need help and they want to
Right.
help you, and now they're living your life, right? Even though
Right.
they have a full wing to themselves, they may have their own kitchen. Of course, they want to see their grandchildren want to go over there. And
Right.
that's what you really do need conversations about if we're going to function as a bigger family. The limit setting around what we expect and want for our children has to come from us first.
Right. And I'm hearing that if it doesn't work, limits need to be set.
Yeah,
Super, super helpful. So Robin, if you are to wrap up our conversation, which went everywhere, went everywhere, but like super, super helpful, what would be the top 5 takeaways that you'd want to give our listeners?
okay. I think, first of all, fear, shame, and guilt all like run around in circles with each other. And the more work you can do on loving yourself, accepting yourself, reaching a place of like, okay, I'm okay. I'm doing my best. And turning off things. This is a second thing, turning off the things that reinforce you're feeling bad about yourself. Unfollowing, stop reading every parenting book ever written. Read some, listen to good podcasts like yours, listen to things that give people good suggestions, actionable items, but not ones where people are sort of like fawning all over themselves about, like how great they are. And that happened. I think also it's perfectly normal to feel ambivalent about parenting or ambivalent about your child from time to time, maybe from day to day, maybe minute to minute. Like we want our children, mostly the children, that we want, right? There are other circumstances, but mostly we want them and we love them. But sometimes we want them to not bother us, and sometimes we want them to be older or not so reactive, and to feel like, I don't want to go through, like, yes, there are green things on your plate. They're there in case you want to try them today. You don't have to try them, but they're there. Maybe you'll try them. And instead you were like, oh my God, just eat a piece of broccoli.
Eat a broccoli.
Eat a string bean. And you're not going to do that. The other thing, which we didn't talk about, but good parents make mistakes. And when they make mistakes, what makes them really good parents is they apologize to their children. Not, I'm sorry all day long. But you know what? I yelled at you instead of talking to you a couple minutes ago, and I'm not sure I wanted to do that, and I'm not sure that felt really good for you. I'm sorry. Let's talk about what happened. How did you feel? Or just quick, I'm sorry. It's okay. I think a very important thing for me is no one in the world can frustrate you or bring you as much joy as your own child. Just impossible, because they are yours and you made them, or you adopted them and they're yours, and they are you. They're also, they get to be mini-yous, which we don't always want to say, the good things, but then the other things, and they can cause us so much angst, but so much joy. And hold on to the joy. Keep the notes section on your phone and write down the goofy or silly or funny or loving things that they say from time to time, maybe even every day, something, and hold on to it. Hold on to it. And then I think we said this, before, but I'll say it again. Talk to other adults. Talk to other adults. If there's no one else, find a therapist. If there's other people with kids your same age that you really trust and like at their school, or, in your daycare, or, on the block, old friends, talk to them.
Robin, thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. Loved it.
Well, thank you. I love the work you're doing, and you know that, and I love talking to you. So it's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Hey Kiddo. If you like what you hear, give us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about Hey Kiddo at our website, hey-kiddo.com. Have a question for our experts? Email us at hello@hey-kiddo.com.